Rooted and rising family. Take a breath. Allow yourself to settle, to soften, to be drawn into a world where instinct meets intuition, where land meets sea, and where two sovereign beings are guided not only by fate, but by feeling. This is a story shaped and inspired by tarot. The tarot cards used for this story is the Empress, the Emperor, the Devil, King of Cups, Three of Cups, Ten of Cups, Two of Pentacles, Six of Pentacles, Eight of Swords, Wheel of Fortune, Queen of Cups, and from the Romance Angels Oracle deck, Romantic Feelings, Healing Family Issues. Now, let's begin. This is The Scent of the Sea by Hadassah the Empress. The sea had known Asha long before it knew the moon. It knew the rhythm of her moods, the shimmer of her laughter beneath its surface, the hush that settled over her when she drifted too near the border where her world ended and another began. There, where the dark waters thinned into silver shallows and the shoreline gave itself over to cliffs and pine, she had developed a habit she never confessed to anyone in her kingdom. She watched him. At first, it had only been passing curiosity. The wolves of the northern coast kept to the land, and the merfolk of the deep kept to the sea. That was the balance. That was the order. But there was one among the wolves who walked the shoreline as if it belonged to him, and yet he owed it reverence. He was broad-shouldered, steady in his movements, the kind of male who did not need to announce authority because authority moved ahead of him. Even from a distance, she could feel it. Sometimes he came in his human form, dressed in dark riding leathers of royal coats that caught the moonlight in their embroidery. Other nights he ran in wolf form, large and silvery gray beneath the night sky, powerful as he moved along the edge of the water with the confidence of a creature who knew exactly where he stood in the world. Asha had begun to wait for those nights. But what she did not know was that he had begun to notice her long before he ever saw her. Started with her scent. Faint at first, so faint he nearly dismissed it as something carried in from far-off currents. But it came again and again, always in the same stretch of shoreline, always when the night was still enough for the world to breathe. Vanilla, brown sugar, honey. It did not belong to the forest. It did not belong to the cliffs, nor the air, nor anything that walked his land, and yet it lingered. The first time it reached him in his wolf form, he had stopped mid-stride, head lifting, nostrils flaring as instinct took over before thought could follow. There, again, that scent, soft, warm, unfamiliar, and wrong only in the sense that it did not belong anywhere it should. But beneath that, something deeper, something that did not question, something that knew. Mate. It struck through him so suddenly his chest tightened around it. His body had reacted before his mind could argue, pacing, searching, circling the shoreline with a sharpened focus that had nothing to do with territory and everything to do with instinct. But there had been nothing to see. No figure, no movement, no trace beyond the scent itself, teasing the edge of the tide before disappearing again. He had returned the next night, and the next, sometimes in wolf form, running the coastline harder than usual, chasing that lingering pool. Other times in his human form, slower, more controlled, but no less aware. It was always there, subtle, consistent, waiting. By the time weeks had passed, he had no longer questioned it. He anticipated it, expected it, followed it. That scent had settled into him, threading through his senses until it was no longer something he simply noticed, but something that called to him. And still, he had not seen her until the night he stopped pretending he hadn't already been found. As he slowed near the cliffs, the scent came stronger than it ever had before. Vanilla, brown sugar, honey. Not carried by the wind this time, but present, close, intentional. He stilled, lifted his head, turned toward the water. "You've been out here for weeks," he said into the night, voice low, steady, certain. The tide shifted, and this time he didn't look away. "If you're going to watch me," he added, quieter now, but no less commanding, "you might as well come closer." The surface of the water broke, slowly, deliberately, and for the first time he saw the source of the scent that had been calling him by name without ever speaking it. Asha rose just enough for her face to meet the moonlight, silver glinting along the crown in her curls, the ocean itself seeming to pause in reverence around her. "I wasn't aware that I wasn't being subtle," she said. And just like that, the unseen became undeniable. "You've been out here for weeks," he said again, quieter now. "Longer than that." "And watching me?" "Yes." That answer should have unsettled him. It should have put him on guard. Yet his voice, when he spoke again, was measured and low. "Why?" Asha tilted her head, letting the water carry her a little closer. "You walk like a man carrying a great deal and pretending it weighs nothing." That caught something in him. It flashed in his eyes before his face closed over it again. "And you," he said, "speak as though you know me." No, replied softly. I speak as someone who has been trying to. From that night on, the shoreline became theirs. Not all at once, not quickly. It began in conversations carried between tide and sand. He would come at dusk or beneath the moon, and she would rise from the sea to meet him. Sometimes she remained in the shallows, jewels and curls gleaming against the dark water. Sometimes he stood closer than before, boots damp from the surf, his voice quieter than she imagined the voice of a king would ever be. He told her of the forest inland, of the packed territories, of the keep his ancestors had built into the mountain stone. He spoke of duty reluctantly, as if the word itself had teeth. She told him of the blue caverns beneath the reef, of halls carved from shell and pearl, of gardens of swaying luminous flora, of songs her people sang low enough to stir the wells. Your world sounds softer than mine, he said one evening. Asha smiled faintly. You have never seen the kingdom of the sea stand in defense of itself. That made him laugh too, and the sound startled them both. Each meeting softened some invisible distance between them. And yet, beneath that growing ease, there was tension too, a pull so strong it felt dangerous. He stood on the land, rooted in title, in bloodline, in expectation. She rose from the sea, carrying a kingdom of her own. Neither was made to bend easily. The invitation came not as command, but as decision. You know my shore, Evander said one evening, his gaze steady on hers. You know the edge of my world. That isn't the same as knowing me. Asha studied him. And you want me to? I do. He extended his hand. She took it. When Asha came to land, she came as queen, not a curiosity, not a spectacle, a queen. Her gown flowed around her in soft, luminous layers, silver detailing catching the light with every movement. Her crown rested within her curls, and her presence carried the quiet authority of someone who had never needed permission to belong anywhere. Evander was waiting for her at the entrance to the great hall. For a moment he said nothing. His gaze moved over her slowly, taking in every detail. Her presence, her composure, the way she carried herself without hesitation in a world not her own. Asha tilted her head slightly, a faint knowing in her expression. You're very quiet for someone who invited me here. A breath left him, almost a quiet laugh. I was considering whether I should have warned them, he said. Warned them? She asked. That you would walk in here like you've always belonged. Her lips curled softly. Do you regret not doing so? She asked. His expression settled, steady and certain. Regret is the last thing on my mind. He offered his arm. She took it. They walked together through halls lined with history. Tall windows spilled warm light across stone floors. Carved pillars told stories of past rulers. Portraits and relics lined the walls, each carrying the weight of lineage, expectation, and legacy. "This belonged to my grandfather," Evander said, resting his hand briefly against a long carved table as they passed into a corridor leading toward the dining hall. "And his before him." "And what have you left?" Asha asked, her gaze moving over this space. His jaw tightened slightly. "That remains to be seen." She turned her head toward him, studying him more closely now. That sounds like an answer of a man who believes he is only what is expected of him. He glanced at her. "And what would you have me be?" Asha met his eyes fully this time. "Yourself," she said, her voice calm but certain. "Not just the king, not just the alpha, you." Something in his expression shifted at that. Not disagreement, recognition. The doors to the dining hall opened. Inside, a round table had been set with precision. Polished wood, gleaming silver, and warm candlelight reflecting off crystal and glass. Seated along the table were members of his inner council, a few close family members, and trusted members of the pack. Conversations quieted as they entered. Eyes turned, some curious, some cautious, some openly assessing. Evander guided Asha to a seat beside him at the head of the table. Dinner began with formality, measured conversation, polite exchanges, careful observation. But it did not stay that way. One of his advisors, older, rigid in posture and voice, set his glass down with deliberate care. "My king," he began, his tone respectful but edged. "The pack understands diplomacy. We understand alliances. But this," his gaze shifted toward Asha, "this is not that." The room stilled. Evander did not immediately respond. "Say what you mean," he said instead. The advisor straightened. "She is not one of us. She belongs to the sea. Our customs, our laws, our very nature are not meant to merge with hers. This connection," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "is not sustainable." A low murmur moved through part of the table. Evander's gaze hardened. "And you've decided that for me?" he asked, voice controlled, but carrying unmistakable authority. "My king, I speak only out of loyalty." "Then speak with respect," Evander cut in, "and with awareness of your place." The advisor's jaw tightened, but he did not back down. "My place is to protect this pack, and that includes questioning anything that may threaten its stability." Silence fell again. Tension thickened, and then Asha stood. "You are not wrong to protect what you belong to," she said, her voice steady, composed. "But you are mistaken in one thing. I am not here to take anything from him, nor from you." She let her gaze move across the table. "I am not here temporarily. I am not asking to be accepted without question, but I am also not someone who will disappear simply because this is unfamiliar. Her eyes returned to the advisor. I come from a kingdom with its own responsibilities, just as he does. If there is concern about whether two worlds can meet, then perhaps the question is not whether it is comfortable, but whether those involved are willing to learn how. The room remained quiet, different now. She inclined her head slightly. I am not leaving, she said, and neither is he. Then she sat. Dinner resumed, not as it had begun, but steadier. The days that followed were not without strain. One afternoon, during a training session in the courtyard, Asha stood at a measured distance, observing rather than participating. Evander was not at her side. He had been elsewhere within the grounds, occupied, leaving her momentarily unaccompanied among the pack. It was then that a younger member approached her. Not by accident, not by misstep, but with intention. There was challenge in the way he moved, calculated, deliberate, testing the boundary he knew existed. He stepped into her space slowly, closing the distance in a way that was unmistakably purposeful. His gaze fixed on hers as if waiting to see how far he could go before she responded. The courtyard quieted suddenly, as others noticed. Asha held her ground. She did not step back. But the air shifted. Moisture gathered, answering her instinct before she could consciously call it. The faintest arc of water formed at her side, controlled, precise, not chaotic, but unmistakably present. The young wolf stilled. At that moment, Evander entered the courtyard, his gaze immediately catching the shift in energy. He moved without hesitation. Enough, he said, voice firm as he stepped forward, positioning himself between them, shielding her and asserting command. The young wolf stepped back. Asha exhaled slowly, and the water dissolved back into the air. No further words were needed. The message had been received. Later it became conversation. Boundaries made clear. Respect understood. Days later, in the quiet of the library, Asha moved slowly along the shelves, fingertips brushing the spines of books. You love this place, Evander said. I do, she admitted. There's something about knowledge kept like this, waiting. He watched her for a moment. I have spent my life being told what strength looks like. She turned toward him. And what does it look like to you? I am still learning. Asha stepped closer, resting her hand lightly against his chest. You completely unravel me. His hand covered hers. "I want this," he said. Asha held his gaze. "Then we choose it." In the weeks that followed, there was no instant harmony. There were meetings where voices rose and expectations clashed. There were moments Evander had to stand firmer than usual, not against enemies, but against hesitation within his own walls. There were times Asha returned briefly to the sea, maintaining balance between what she was and what she was building. But there was also progress, understanding, reciprocity. One evening, they stood together on the wide balcony outside Evander's chambers. The forest stretched out on one side. The sea shimmered on the other. Asha stood at the edge, her hands resting lightly against the stone railing, her gaze fixed on the horizon where water met sky. Behind her, Evander stepped in close. His presence settled around her before his arms did. Then slowly, deliberately, he drew her back against him, one arm resting securely around her waist. His face lowered near hers, brushing lightly against her hair, his breath warm against her temple as he spoke. "We are still in the middle of it," he said. "Yes." His hold on her tightened slightly, grounding, certain. "Do you regret it?" Asha turned her head just enough to meet him, her expression calm, unwavering. "Not for a single tide." And so they remained, not finished, not flawless, but chosen, still choosing, and still learning how to make two worlds become one. As always, stay rooted, stay rising, and aligned with all the divine gifts ahead.